Matthew McConaughey this intro here. Hey everyone, welcome to the first live stream we've done in a while. It's the second overall one that we've had when we did Brave New World a few months ago. Listen, life is busy, kids, work, you know, the drill. It's a grind all the time. But I wanted to take the opportunity to talk about a few movies that I've seen recently. It's funny. It's like I spent an hour talking about one, and now I don't want to spend more than an hour talking about three. So we may move a little bit more quickly tonight, kind of depending on participation in the chat. So let's see. We have Andrew in the chat saying 801, let's go. Listen, man, you got to let the audience build up a little bit. We have Jesse here. Says, good evening, buddy. Welcome, man. Glad to have you. Kind of before we get started, these are the three movies we're talking about today. But there is one other thing I wanted to talk about before we jump into that. And that is, I did get to see the 20th anniversary re-release of Revenge of the Sith, Star Wars Episode 3 in theaters. And that was just magical. It's been one of my favorites for a long, long time. For a time, it was my favorite. Now I kind of have it number 2 because Empire Strikes Back is Empire Strikes Back. But sometimes Revenge of the Sith is still my favorite. And it's definitely my favorite Star Wars story and my favorite era. I just like the prequel setting a lot with the Republic and the Separatists and all that. And it was just a magical showing. It was funny. I got sat next to some very loud and obnoxious teenagers, which really did detract from the experience. But I will say I was nice to them because beforehand they were like, excuse me, sir. Have you seen this before in the big screen? And I was like, yeah, I was there 20 years ago. And they were like, well, we love Star Wars. This is our first time. And I know they were thinking, old man. But it was a great experience. And I love that movie so much. And I'm glad to see it made like 25 million this weekend. So pretty cool. But yeah, what we will be talking about today is a swing, a hit, and a miss. And I am referring to each one of these movies, not in this order, but in Sinners, Havoc, and The Accountant 2. So trying to keep you guessing on how I felt about what. Sinners released last weekend, so it's already been out a week, and I saw it, but hey, man, get off my back about getting this out on time. Live stream for 3 movies, and he opens with a catchphrase from someone who appears in none of the 3. Listen, I do what I want, okay? Havoc came out, I believe, on Thursday, April 25th. It's a Netflix movie. And The Accountant 2 came out this weekend. So we're going to go and dive right on in. And I am going to start with the one that is my least favorite on towards my favorite of the 3. And my least favorite of the 3 is Havoc. So let's dive into that. I don't want to spend too long on this in the grand scheme of the stream because I'm massively disappointed. The guy who directed it, Gareth Evans, he wrote it too, is, in my opinion, one of the, if not the best action director working today. He's responsible for The Raid and The Raid 2, which are 2 of the best martial arts films ever made. And The Raid 2 is sometimes in my top 10 films of all time. I absolutely adore both of those. I haven't seen the horror stuff he's done, but all the other martial arts stuff I did, that I've seen him do, that he started with, still like really hold up, even if sometimes the story can be a little bit messy. And so when Havoc was announced that it was going to be like this action cop drama with the title it has, starring Tom Hardy, I was so stoked. Little like bummed it's going to Netflix because I like seeing stuff in theaters. And they filmed this all the way back in 2021. So I've been nervous because it's taken so long to come out and the reshoots and all being kind of extensive. And unfortunately, my fears kind of proved true. I think there will be a lot of people who love this because they haven't seen Gareth Evans' style of action before, and that will sell them alone. I think it will crowd please who it needs to crowd please. But after you've seen something like The Raid and The Raid 2, which is, you have a very simplistic, like action premise and a very like crime epic action premise in, you know, the Raid 1, the Raid 2. This tries to be a little bit of all of that, and it's just so messy. It's like an hour and 47 minutes, and it feels like there should be 3 hours of story. Or they should have cut it down to 90 minutes of lean, like, runtime. Forgive me if you hear kids in the background. I do have children, and one is screaming right now. It happens. And I will say, when it gets to the action, and boy does it take forever to get to the action, it is as frenetic and energetic as ever. Hey, let me pause real quick. I will be right back. Sorry about that, y'all. I had a screaming child. Something happened, and just wanted to communicate. So yeah, where was I? So I will say the first act of this movie is an absolute slog. It takes forever to get going. There is a really cool chase scene, but it is bogged down by so much awful visual effects and CGI and green screen that I was like, why was this shot like this? I almost feel like it's a case of Netflix giving so much creative like reign and money to do it this way that they don't have to do it the real way. There's no restraint, so they can, you know, cheat it. Whereas in the Raid 2, if you watch how they made the climactic car chase in that film, it is incredible stuff. The stunts, the camera work, and that's just not it here. So I was pretty like nervous already, like, man, this is not setting a good example. Now, the trademark brutality of Gareth Evans is still there, but it was kind of a rough start. So as it kept going, you know, I was just not into the story. There was all of these other elements, too many characters, like for one, for the length of this movie and for the scope of story it's trying to tell. It's trying to like hit the like main plot from like 3 different points, and there's like 3 different factions per se. And I don't want to spoil too much because I don't want to tell you what it's about, because it's honestly like better if you just don't know. It's just a cop action movie. I should probably say dirty cop action movie, because there are no likable characters in this movie, hardly at all, save maybe one. But then, as I'm bored out of my mind and just not feeling it, how it's shot and how the characters are and how the performances are, Tom Hardy is doing his like sleazy Eddie Brock thing again. The whole underworld thing, it just feels like things we've seen before, and I'm just not into it. Then there's this like nightclub shootout brawl action sequence that is just, it is so good. It was such a good action scene, man. How it's blocked and staged, like Gareth Evans choreographs and shoots action like nobody else out there right now. The way he uses the camera, the way he like tilts it and like puts you in the center of it, and how bodies just go flying everywhere. It's just awesome. And then I got really excited that, okay, maybe now we're getting into the movie that I think it is. Then nothing happens for the next little bit, and we're just limping along. No good character drama, really, beyond cliche. I guess there's good vibes, like in how the city looks and all that when it's not the awful visual effects. But then it gets to the big shootout finale. And while I know some will have reservations about like them doing a lot of digital muzzle flashes and like probably not real guns, right? You know, they're not. It reminded me of how we shot them in the raid, but that was because it was so low budget, so I was a little confused. It all looked the way it did. But it is edited so vigorously, and there's so much brutality and so many explosions and like shaky cam used effectively to like bring you in the action, charging with the camera. Like it is just like when this movie is doing its action thing, it is firing on all cylinders, and I adore that about it. When it's not though, when it's leaning into the story that it doesn't explain anything with, and I even wrote in my notes that it was profoundly messy. The action is as energetic and frenetic as ever. There's a convoluted story and undercooked characters, and when it's vibing, it's thrilling, but that can't overcome the ugliness that is the rest of it. So I just didn't think it made for a good film. I just didn't. I think it needed a huge rewrite to really narrow its focus, or it needed a broader scope. It's one of those things where it's like, I can see how they could have expanded this into something much, much bigger, or they could have cut a lot of the fat to make it a very lean 90-minute film. And I'm leaning towards the 90-minute film because it literally takes almost an hour to get to that big first action sequence I am talking about. So it just feels completely uneven. However, there are good performances and turns from people. I really liked Timothy Olyphant in the role that he's in. Tom Hardy, he's great in the action sequences, and he carries himself well and suave. But he, like I said, he's just doing this voice thing. That just didn't work for me. Like, if you've seen the Venom movies and you know how he talks in that, and he's like, Eddie and Venom and dirty cops, and I'm gonna kill you all. Like, it just wasn't for me. So, all that being said, I don't have a ton more to say about it. It is the definition of a Netflix movie that could have been good, but has all the trademark issues of a streaming movie. From a director I had way better, higher expectations for. Probably one of my biggest disappointments, because I was really, really looking forward to this. And it just makes me think about the whole concept of restraint and how sometimes smaller budgets and less creative control, more pressure from studios, I'm not saying I always want that, can sometimes force creatives to get creative. I don't know. I'm curious to see what he does next, but I kind of hope he leaves Netflix behind for those reasons. I'd love to see him take on, I know he was rumored to do a Deathstroke movie for a long time, and now there's like reportedly some Deathstroke and Bane script in the works. He'd be perfect for that. So if you're going to watch Havoc, if you like action movies, the action is really entertaining, but it's just mid. It's not like bad enough to say like this is the worst acting and editing and directing I've ever seen. You know, the VFX are bad. The action is fantastic. The story's kind of like messy and scatterbrained, but there's cool concepts. It's just mid across the board as a whole. And that's why I give Havoc 2.5 out of 5 stars. I want to give it higher, but I can't really justify lower either because I didn't think it was outright awful. But just profoundly disappointed with really energizing action. So that's Havoc. And moving on, what I want to talk about next is the sequel to one of the most underrated action movies of the last decade, which was The Accountant. And that movie, and on rewatch, kind of blew me away with how well written it was, how kind of thought-provoking and emotionally resonant it felt, and how it focused on a relationship with brothers, which is a bit of a spoiler for the first one, but if you've seen any of the marketing for the second one, you know, they're brothers, John Bernthal and Ben Affleck. So I had really high hopes. I hate that it took 9 years to get a sequel, and I think COVID probably had something to do with that. But in some ways, I'm glad they took their time. However, I saw early reactions that were like super duper glowing. But then right before it came out, there was a few critics that poured in that were like really mid to negative on it. So I was a little bit nervous again. So I went and saw it, and I will say, I really liked it. I really liked it, and kind of the opposite of Havoc. It doesn't have nearly the amount of action that I was hoping for, and I kind of felt that way about the first one too. When it does have action, it is phenomenally staged action, and it's really good action. I just wish there was about twice as much of it. Whereas the first one focused on the accounting and the underworld like element of all of this world, this one focuses much more on the relationship between the brothers and also this other plot line which is kind of like the A plot that kind of feels like it's from a different movie. And as they start to intertwine and entangle those two plots, I think the movie does have a little bit of an identity crisis where it's like it's really dour and dark and serious and violent and brutal. Then the next scene is like they're dancing and like shouting at each other and having a good time and yelling and like cracking jokes and all of that. And it was just kind of like a little bit of tonal whiplash. I'm not saying that like dark films can't have humor, but there was like, what kind of movie do they want to make? And I feel like they're trying to marry the two. Maybe there was two scripts that they kind of pulled together or two ideas, because there's a character, I think she's unnamed, can't say too much about that, who is in the background of the movie, and is in the opening scene in which something happens that I was not a fan of. I didn't think it helped the story at all. Who again, she feels like she walked in from like one of the Bourne movies or something like that. But yeah, so one other thing that was like a really kind of like sticking point is Ben Affleck's performance is so much different from his performance in The First Accountant that he almost feels like a different character at times. I think what they were going for is that it's been nearly a decade. He's mellowed out a little bit. He is more open to things. Maybe the first movie's experience has changed him. But he does this thing with his voice and some of his mannerisms, and there's just a lot more humor with him that isn't like situational humor with him meeting other people, but like him by himself kind of thing. That sometimes it felt like a bit much, and it's a little bit jarring in comparison when you first watch I just rewatched the first movie. I do think it was an effort of Ben Affleck to make his performance a little bit more distinct, as he plays an autistic character, and in the first one, like, they tell a lot of that through dialogue, and there's a lot more of that in his voice and mannerisms in this. So in that sense, I kind of appreciate what they're going for, and maybe his guard's a little bit let down with the characters he's around in this one, like his brother. Whereas John Bernthal, he's just having the time of his life. They're both way less serious in this one. Borderlining the parody at a couple points, but there's a lot of personality involved, so I didn't mind it too much. There was really nice levity, and when I'm kind of a sucker for films that focus on brotherly relationships. So those were kind of my issues. Other than the biggest one in the room is, as the story goes, it's just so confusing. It is super convoluted and difficult to follow, and I still don't know if I completely understand everything. Like, why are we here right now? What happened? Who was that? Wait, how did that get there? But it's okay, because the one thing I loved about the first one so much that this one maintains is these films have so much conviction. The first one had such well-written, rounded characters that you just wouldn't expect. And that continues in this one, maybe not to the depths of the first one and where it goes. I just found the story more compelling there. But they're still all in what they're trying to do and trying to accomplish, in the ways they're doing it and why they're doing it. There is a lot of heart in the relationships, in the characters' goals, in what they're trying to do. Even if there's still not very much accounting going on, especially in this one. They're very much real people in real situations. I think you could remove maybe a couple of the humorous scenes. And I wish there had been more action. But when the action hits, man, it's so it's just so good. I really like the dialogue matches and how the brothers challenge each other and how the little subtle hints of humor between them. The world building they kind of do with the brothers and the relationship and like the network of underworld assassins. And I don't mean like John Wick. It's a little bit more subtle than that. They also kind of further the whole like positive view on the abilities of autistic individuals, which was really cool. I think maybe they take it a little bit far in terms of how much they focus on it in this and like what this crazy group of hackers can do. But I won't lie to you that it was like kind of a neat like network, and Ben Affleck's character calls them my people. Like that was cool. Like it gave me like goosebumps to be like, man, that's kind of a neat concept, right? And it leads to this big shootout like at the end where you can't help but root for all of them. And it is like a super precise tactical kind of action. And I'm a sucker for hand-to-hand combat, so it's a lot of shooting, which isn't always my cup of, I won't say it's not my cup of tea. I like a good hand-to-hand fight, sword fight. But a good shootout is like one of the best things. And my friend Andrew, who also saw this, Andrew Clark, he's in the comments. He made a comment to me after. He's like, thank the Lord that, and this is not verbatim, but he was just like, thank you, whoever made the decision to set this final shootout in broad daylight and not at nighttime for once. So many final like big climactic things are set at night. It's easier to hide visual effects and all these things. It's easy to mask a lot of filmmaking stuff when scenes are at nighttime. But everything is clearly shot, not shaky cam. There's big fights. There's emotional payoff. There is a mission you can believe in. There's good done. There's justice delivered in a way that feels like, man, the whole point of the story is like there's stuff that escapes the system, right? And the system kind of binds them down. And going outside the system to save children or people who otherwise can't be helped. Like it shows characters who are kind of portrayed as scummy in other parts of the movies, both of them, as heroes, and how that changes John Bernthal's character and the things that they do and their relationship with each other. It just got to me. It hit me hard. The heart was good. And Andrew said, yes, sir. And it ends in a place where it's like, okay, we have the first one, which is like this super emotional, like face off between brothers. And then this one is like, they're forced back into each other's lives to work on this other case. There's rumors a third one is going to be like lean straight into buddy comedy. When I say buddy comedy, I mean like a buddy cop kind of movie dynamic. And I think they've earned that at this point. They make it feel really natural. To get to the point of like we are now at a place where we can do that as the sole focus of the story. I kind of feel like that's what they wanted for this one, but they felt like they couldn't quite justify it. However, with the ending of the first movie saying like, I'll see you next week and I'll find you, and then he just like doesn't for 8 years, I was kind of like, what? That's what? So we got Michael Hoover in the chat. So what's up, brother? And what's up, man? Thanks for coming. So it sounds like I'm being hard on this movie in some ways, but it is just refreshing to have a well-made, very tactical, intelligent movie. Maybe a little too intelligent for me at times because the story being confusing. That isn't just explosions all the time or super choppy edited action. That isn't afraid to put characters first and action secondary, even if I wish there was more of it, because when the action does hit, it feels earned and it feels very impactful every time, and I really appreciate that. I highly recommend watching the first one and watching the second one. I do think the second one has a lot more problems and is a little bit weaker, really a good bit weaker than the first one for me. But I am pleasantly surprised by this franchise and its momentum, especially at the box office. And I do hope we continue to get more movies. Ben Affleck, I've always been a fan of. And John Bernthal is just great. They're great together. They have a good dynamic. And the film is at its strongest when it's focusing on their dynamic. So a whole movie of that sounds great to me. And it's only possible because it's been built up so well between these two. They're mostly well-written movies. They have good dialogue. They have interesting stories. They have meaningful stories. And it's done with so much conviction and so much heart with visceral action. I mean, what more can you ask for? Right? So definitely give The Accountant 2 a chance. If you're into action movies at all. I thought it was really good. I was a little bit torn on my rating. I was thinking a certain rating when I got out, and then as I thought about the plot issues I had, and some of the performance stuff that's just a little bit jarring, I didn't like it. But then after thinking on it more and talking with Andrew and thinking through some of the more logistical things, I felt like maybe I was being too harsh because of expectations and not what was actually in the movie. And a lot of comparison to the first, that's kind of an easy thing to do with sequels. It's well, in the first one they did XYZ, and in the second one they did ABC. So it's taking it as it is, I think it's super flawed, but a really good time at the movies. And that's why I give The Accountant 2 3.5 out of 5 stars. So yeah, I've been talking for 28 minutes. People that are here, thank you for joining. Let me ask you real quick. Let's take a break. Have you heard of or seen Havoc? Or have you heard of or seen The Accountant or The Accountant 2, and do you plan to? Let me know in the comments. I'm going to take a sip of water. All good if there's no one. I know it's a Sunday night. Oh no, I forgot to put my banner up. All right, while y'all are typing in the comments, I will be right back. All right. Thank y'all for indulging me. You talk like this for a while and suddenly you need water. But yeah, sorry for those of you that maybe got ads or whatever. Let's check out some comments and then we'll jump into the next one. Let me fix this. What does this do? Oh, that's cool, since I was talking about The Accountant too. So let's see here. Andrew said tragic, haven't seen, not sure what you were talking about. My bad, missed it. Jesse said almost watched Havoc last night. Look, man, I'm always going to say give a movie a shot, and it may inspire you to check out the Raid movies, which I think everyone should watch if you like action. Andrew said bring your kid on to review Sonic 3. Listen, I don't want to open that door. He would be cute as mess, but then he probably wouldn't want to leave because he loves to see himself on camera. Wonder where he could have ever gotten that from. Jesse said, "You're good, man. Gotta love kids." Appreciate it, man. Jesse said, "I told my wife I wasn't big on the trailer to go see it right away. Nothing against the actors, but the plot just didn't seem that great." Are you referring to Havoc or The Accountant 2? Michael said, "I haven't seen either Accountant." Michael, I actually think you would really, really like these. They're not like something like a Jason Statham movie where it's like your typical throwback, almost like 80s, 90s action movie based on star power. These are more in line with something. I don't want to say the Bourne movies because like just in terms of like tone, they're very unique, right? And Gavin O'Connor, which Andrew mentioned, I haven't seen anything bad from him. He's a fantastic director. Also, the score in the first one was really good. But they're really good action movies. A little bit more cerebral. Is cerebral action a thing? I don't know. But anyway, you should check them out. Andrew, I got an ad when you were asking your question. You saw it in the comments. Michael, I am amped for Thunderbolts. I am too, actually. The early reactions and all have me hyped, but I feel like it always happens for Marvel movies, so we'll see. But you know me, I'm not off the Marvel hype train like a lot of people are. I'm not as excited as I used to be, but I'm looking forward to it greatly, especially a couple characters in it that I've been waiting a long time to see. Jesse said, "Only one of the three I've seen has been Sinners. Got to check out Havoc when I get a chance, and I'll wait for The Account 2 for digital release." Fair enough. I get it. All right. Cool. Caught up on the comments. So that leaves us with the final movie we're talking about tonight, and that is Sinners. And I will tell you, I don't think this movie was really much on my radar until maybe a few months ago when the first trailer came out, which I didn't watch. I just heard Ryan Coogler, vampire movie, saw the cast in the poster. Okay, I'm in. Ryan Coogler is a phenomenal director and writer. I love the first Creed. I really like the Black Panther movies. They are, some of the best written of them. And I think he's got a really promising career ahead of him. And it's just always good to see an original work in a genre. And I'm not a big horror fan, but vampire movies can be really entertaining. And it looked like it was going to be mixing action and stuff from some of what I read. So I kind of, for the most part, other than knowing there were vampires in this, I went to this one blind. I saw it with my boy Andrew in the comments. And I didn't think it would be bad because Coogler's track record, which, Michael just mentioned, Black Panther 2 is underrated, and I agree. I really liked Black Panther 2. But Stone pretty much still nailed it right here. Loved Sinners. Creed is still Coogler's masterpiece. I agree with both of those statements. Creed is just incredible. But I did love Sinners. I thought it was excellent. Dude, the vibes in this movie for days, right? It's not a musical, but it's kind of like, I read that it was a music adjacent, someone say in an article. I don't want to take credit for that. There's a lot of musical set pieces in it. I don't want to give too much away, but the performances are just so good. And, I can see why the black community would rally around this movie, and how it's made for a specific group of people to feel seen and see their culture. And that's really awesome to all see and for me to experience, because it's just Stone. I think you said it in one of maybe your review or whatever, but you mentioned that it's great when you're watching a movie and you just know you're experiencing cinema, you're experiencing something good. And I got that vibe so many times throughout this. And Stone just mentioned that one music scene will be one of the best scenes of the year. And I completely agree. It's just, when you think about movies that come out nowadays that are original, that aren't um, comic book movie or, a big franchise, really. It's not like something that is just completely new. It's always refreshing, but it's also a little worrisome because they don't always do as well at the box office anymore. I feel like a lot of those types of things are streaming movies, and I'm so glad this wasn't because it looked great on the big screen. I will say, though, that I can't talk about how much I love it without kind of getting into some of the nitty-gritty about it, and I don't want to spoil it. The less you know about this going in, the better. And I knew literally nothing about the plot other than vampires show up, and I kind of wish I didn't even know that. I kind of wish that it hadn't been marketed as a vampire movie because it would have been a great surprise. I know why they did, and I don't know if that would have been a good idea. You've got to have a hook, right, for people. But when it's being a gangster like movie about a club, it's awesome. When it's being and it's a period piece. When it's being a vampire movie, it's awesome. When it's straddling the line between the two, the cracks kind of begin to show for me. They don't marry the two storylines as cohesively as I hope they would have. For example, without giving anything away, there's two instances where I really feel this. At the beginning, there's some things to hint at the horror of what is coming, right? And I feel like those are very, very much inserted there because it isn't until like 45 minutes later in the movie that the vampire element is even introduced. And it literally comes out of left field. You only know it's coming because of that insert at the beginning and if you know what the movie's about, right? I'm not saying that's inherently bad. It's an interesting notion, and I know I haven't seen it, but people have told me from Dusk Till Dawn. Stone, I think it was you that told me. From Dusk Till Dawn is kind of like the same way. It's interesting that there's precedent. I don't think that makes it right. I think maybe that scene where the vampire element is introduced should have come earlier, and they could have interspersed that whole stuff at the house throughout the first act to make us build towards the dread and to like remind the audience that it's still coming. However, that build up in the first act is full of really great character stuff. Really well gosh. The cinematography, Ryan Coogler was just cooking like on all cylinders here. There's so many dolly shots and tracking shots that are just beautifully done with like interesting characters with cool names and backgrounds and just oozes all things. It's like an awesome gangster movie like setup, right? But because we know other stuff is coming, it does feel like it takes forever to get going into what is the actual A plot. And so I struggle with the pacing of it. I definitely felt that pacing. Now, if it had just been a gangster movie about these characters, set in the 1920s or whenever it was set, I don't know if I would have felt the pacing issues. I think I would have known like, all right, this is more of a slow burn character drama and all that. And I don't mind slow burns, but I think like, oh man, they're really taking their time to set all this up. Like really taking their time. So I think the pacing of that first act really was felt. It felt long. But that's not to say there isn't good stuff in it. But I also wonder, because when the horror hits, boy, does it hit. And if it didn't have that set up, would it hit as hard? So my idea as someone who is an editor at heart and edits a lot of videos and has 10 years experience doing it, is I would have interspersed those first introductory vampire scenes across the first act to kind of make it, let's be like, oh, we're switching genres now, because I would have watched the heck out of just a gangster movie with these characters, and I would have watched the heck out of a really lean 80-minute vampire movie with these characters too. I'm glad it's both because we need more genre fusions like this. But I did struggle with that a little bit. So because of that, though, it's like the gangster stuff doesn't ever feel like it's as fully fleshed out as it could be. And the vampire stuff gets a lot of great focus, but the characters end up trapped in this one place. And I feel like they have the whole gimmick of, the old lore vampires. They have to be invited in to be able to come in. But I feel like there's a lot more stuff that could have been done to increase the tension and the horror, other than just like conversations at the door, which are all great, don't get me wrong. But I feel like the premise of them being trapped there and like the action around it and all, they could have just taken it a step further and really ran with it. And they didn't. And I wonder if, if some of the maybe stuff in the beginning wasn't there, would they have had more time? What was left on the cutting room floor? What was in the script? So in that sense, there's a smidge of disappointment and that, and then there's the big like finale that happens like there, the confrontation per se. And the action gets really confusing in how it's edited. There's a particular part where there's like vampires and people fighting, and like we met all the characters that are inside, and there's all these vampires and they're fighting and people are getting bit. And I'm like, wait a minute, who is getting bit? There wasn't other people, because we see all the other characters like on their own, but then there's like these other people being bit, and I'm like, what is? I don't know. It was just staged in a really like awkward kind of way. And I think the rules with the vampires was a little bit unclear at times, especially with one of the big reveals at the end that I can't spoil. And then, that big climactic thing happens, and then there's a kind of tacked on finale from the gangster plot that just did not feel like it was kind of cohesive with the rest of it. And it doesn't make a lot of logistical sense. Like, why would this happen now and not earlier? Had it happened earlier, it would have made for a much more interesting third act showdown than kind of what we got. Not that that was bad, but it would have elevated to the next level. Then Ryan Coogler does something really cool with the credits and credit scenes, like mid-credit scenes. People still miss them nowadays. People are going to miss the one in this one too, because there's one in the credits that is crucial to the story. But then there's one at the tail end of the credits that I think is very important to the theme of the movie. So if you want to go see it, stay not just to the thing at the beginning of the credits, but all the way to the end. Simply because it's just worth seeing. It's worth hearing. At first I didn't really get it, but as I thought about it more, I did. I do want to talk about, I am a Christian, and from a Christian perspective, obviously the movie's called Sinners, and it deals with some religious setting and themes you can't not with vampires. And I don't love the conclusions it comes to. I struggled with it a little bit, and it's kind of gotten worse. And then just the more I've thought about it, the harder time I have with what it's trying to say. It kind of takes the stance with vampires that like a lot of the Christian elements that would work against them doesn't work, like, which is like, why? It implies that the evil they share is actually better than what we have. It gets really deep into some other pagan things, and there's some commentary on one of the characters, his father's reverend, and a decision he has to make with the church. But at the same time, there's this post-credit scene I'm talking about that kind of alleviates some of that for me, and what it maybe is trying to say. There are people that are calling it anti-Christian propaganda. I don't know if I would call it propaganda. I do think it takes a stance, and that stance isn't positive, but the stance is trying to be real and honest with maybe how I took it. Obviously, it's condemning like aspects of like racism, but or all of racism really. But in the religious sense, it's condemning legalism and how legalism can create its own form of slavery, and especially for the main character. And there's a lot to unpack with that I can't with spoilers or without spoilers. So I struggle with a lot of what it's trying to say. I don't like some of what it's trying to say and the conclusions it comes to. I'm not saying the film has to agree with me. It says what it says, right? And I don't think that makes it a bad movie. I do find it sad at a couple points, but then that end credits part hits. And I'm like, okay, why this song in this moment? What is the message here? And I'm still going to be thinking about it. It's one of those movies where I think the more I think about it, the more I'm going to like it, the more I'm going to wrestle with, the more I'm going to grapple. And I think it'll take rewatches and a lot of study to kind of figure out what this movie actually is saying. There's a lot of depth here. And it reminds me of the film Nope, which, you know, I had some similar complaints with the first time I watched it, but the more I thought about it, the more I liked it. And then on a rewatch, it just went up, right? And that movie had some really interesting themes to break down as well. So, yeah, I loved it. I did not think it was without issues, especially in terms of pacing and kind of like the fusion of the genres was cool, and the cool factor like works better than the things taking away from it. But when the cracks begin to show, they really begin to show for me. And the way it was structured confused me a couple times. But I'll take a sip of water, then we're going to check out the comments. Jesse said, it was a movie definitely for the theater in IMAX. Completely agree. I didn't get to see an IMAX, though. He also said, I'd say it's probably my second best vampire movie, still behind The Lost Boys. You know, I was thinking earlier, because I was trying to make a list of, like, the best vampire movies. And I have this at, like, number 4 or 5. And I was thinking about The Lost Boys specifically, which I saw for the first time a couple years ago, like, which is better. My favorite vampire movie will always be the first Blade. Blade is just incredible. I love it so much. Stone says, From Dusk gives you zero indication that vampires will show up before they do. But did the marketing for it reveal them? Like, did people go in expecting it to be a vampire movie? Or did they go in expecting a Tarantino crime drama directed by, I think Rodriguez directed it? That would be my question, because it would have been a really interesting experiment if they hadn't have advertised vampires and this like just advertised it as this like gangster movie, right? That movie has a different vibe though. Okay, I haven't seen it. I just know some of the famous scenes, and I know the famous twist of like the vampires. Jesse said it's funny because going into the movie, I said it was like a modern day version of From Dusk Till Dawn. Yeah. I've had a bunch of people tell me that now. Stone said, I don't share your feeling about the pacing, but I get it. Fair enough. It's one of those things where it's not like this movie is a slog, but it was noticeable. Like, it was a noticeable, like, man, this movie's taking its time. And it is slow. It's a lot of setup that they do, a lot of setup. And I just wondered maybe if it could have been structured differently. Not necessarily cutting stuff out. Because sometimes I usually often want more from a movie, not necessarily cutting things out of a movie to trim it, unless it feels like stuff is just completely unnecessary. And I don't think the stuff at the beginning is unnecessary. It's just how it's structured for me. Michael said the pacing didn't remotely bother me. He actually said the paving. I'm glad the concrete didn't bother you, Michael. He said the pacing didn't remotely bother me. I personally prefer holding off on the vampire stuff for the longer scene at the house. Yeah, I don't think I can agree. Because again, it just feels like it comes out of nowhere. It doesn't feel it feels incongruous to the rest of it. It's not congruent with the rest of the plot. And the only reason we even know something is coming is because they have to do inserts at the beginning to make it feel like. So I feel like it's a scripting issue. And you got to remember, they still cut away from the house because the vampire shows up. They do whatever. He goes inside, and this is really spoilers. They have the initial scene where the vampire shows up. They cut away, then they go back to it for a longer scene. And I'm just saying that those two scenes could have happened earlier in the film, and then they could have done the thing where they show up later. And I think it would have flowed better. I know that seems like such a small nitpick, but I think it would have helped people like, oh my gosh, when are the vampires going to show up? You know? It reminds me of, like in Godzilla movies. You know Godzilla is going to show up, and this is a bad example to use with Michael, because Michael's not a Michael's not a Godzilla fan. But you know Godzilla's going to show up, but it's still annoying when it takes an hour to get him there, you know? This is a Godzilla movie. Like, this is a vampire movie. Not that the film is being afraid. I know what it's trying to do. I'm fine with where the plots converge. It's just the getting there part. Like I said, interspersing scene throughout the first act would have felt like it was interrupting. I don't agree. I feel like there's a couple parts where it would have been very easy because we're jumping between different character points anyway, and then we randomly interrupt that story to introduce the vampire. So I think it's backwards. Agree about having a hard time keeping up with the action. Yeah, that's now 3 people. I think me, you, and Stone all say that. It was just edited kind of funky. It's blocked kind of funky. And it's like, I almost felt like to me that they threw in extra characters that were not in the building so they could have people to get bit. And I'm like, I just don't understand who is dying. Is anyone dying? Like, there weren't just no names waiting around there, right? Like I said, people can wait. Sure, yeah. Like, it's not that it's a slow burn. I still think within a slow burn, it's about structure, right? And structure can affect pacing. And for me, you have 45 minutes of gangster plot, boom, out of nowhere, vampire plot. So you have insert 45 minutes, boom, it's here. When you could have had insert shot 20 minutes, first vampire scene, another 20 minutes, second vampire scene, and then the convergence. I don't know. I just think it could have been sprinkled out as build up a little bit more to build tension. And it could have just increased the sense of dread. I don't want to die on that hill because, man, when the stuff starts going down and the buildup is there, right? When like we know what's going to be happening, I was on the edge of my seat, dude. It's like, no, don't. How many are like, no, don't do that. Oh gosh, no, don't let that happen. Oh boy, what's gonna happen next? Like, Andrew can tell you, I like cover my ears and like not my eyes, but cover my ears because jump scares can get me, which a couple of them did in this. But then like hear how the vampires are reasoning and like that musical scene. Oh, it's just so freaking good. Like, so creative, right? And like how everything is presented. It's well filmed. It's well acted. It's well written, and it's just unique, right? It's a unique take on a mythos that is so old and so familiar at this point that doesn't feel like you can do anything fresh with it. And Ryan Coogler has proved that yes, you absolutely can. But all of the convergence stuff of the two plots only works because we care about the characters within the movie. Everyone is given personalities and unique backstories and relations with each other that are either tragic or funny or just believable throughout, right? And so when each casualty or inevitability comes, it is felt deeply because we care about these people, and it makes everything so much more impactful, especially by the end, man. I was just like, holy cow. And that one part of the ending, parents, it hit hard. It hit really hard. And I love that about it. So I love the slow burn nature of it. I think it makes the payoff that much more worth it. So again, it's more of an editing thing and the pacing of the editing, you know, but also, I can see why people love it the way it is. Like, no, I love that we just get a sprinkle before they give us the full tinkle. I thought of that in my head and I could barely get it out. You know, the sprinkle for the oh gosh, okay, crack myself up. But oh man, and then Coogler just uses very elevated cinematic like language with the camera to what could be the most mundane shot reverse shot or like people driving in a car. Like there's long takes. Oh, dude, I love a good oneer, right? And how he establishes space with it. Like we think we're just watching a musical scene, like with people singing and all that, when we're really establishing a space in a sense that is going to be almost like a prison later. how he plays with the rules of the movie, and which again I think we're vague in like what hurts what, but the terms of like the space and how he deals with like being bound to things, like being a slave to like vampirism or religion or legalism. There's a lot of interesting themes, so it's just someone cooking on like the highest level here, right? But again, I keep coming back to struggling with some of the themes, struggling with some of how the first act is structured, and struggling with that I feel like more could have done with both the fusion of both premises at certain points and the tacked on finale. The two tacked on finales, I should say. One of them I don't mind, the one in the first part of the credits. The other one, it's like, I know why it's there, but it doesn't really need to be there. It almost feels like it had been cut and you don't really lose much other than the obvious thing. But again, I feel like had those that have seen it, that had happened earlier in the night, it would have made for a much more interesting and crazy finale, which would have made more sense with the action and the confusion of who was getting bit and all that. So let's check back into the thing. Andrew said, can confirm. Jesse said, epic scene. Good stuff. Michael said, all good. I definitely respect your editing background. Everything you're saying makes sense. I just didn't feel that myself. Totally understand. You're wrong, but I totally understand. So I do think Sinners was great. I think it is one that can definitely grow in my head over time. I remember when Nope came out, I gave it 4 stars. And then like after like a long time and a rewatch, I was like, yeah, no, I'm bumping this up. Right. So like where I'm at right now, until I can kind of grapple with some of the deeper things of the movie that I'm just not quite ready to make a commitment on how I feel about yet. Other than like surface level commentary, and seeing it again, trying to figure out some of the issues with like the action and the staging of it, in the fusion elements. Maybe those will be like, actually, you know what? Maybe less is more. Maybe I'll feel better about the less is more approach in some of those areas. And maybe I won't feel that they're missed opportunities. I remember in Nope, I keep comparing the two. Nope, I thought had the slowest first act, like of all time, not of all time. And then when we watched it again, I was like, oh man, we know what's coming. Like, oh man, I see why they're doing this. They're making us care about the characters. Like, it all made sense, right? And it doesn't have the random Mookie subplot, which wasn't random and is really vital to that movie's themes. But it's almost like I needed one other big thing in it for it to really land completely. And how the night is resolved with the vampires, I thought was kind of like, really? Like that's how this happens? I don't want to spoil anything. Because it's supposed to be spoiler free. So there's a little bit of that. So all in all though, Sinners is great. I don't think it's perfect. I don't think it's like the best movie in years like some are saying, but I do think it's really great. And it's one of the best original movies I've seen in a while. And it gives me hope that because it's doing so well and that people are flocking to it, that it creates the right kind of dynamic. I know Coogler is like supposed to get the rights back to it in 25 years. Honestly, I would watch more movies set in this universe. I'm not saying like a cinematic universe, but I would watch sequels or movies set around like the same world. Sinners 2, 2 Sinners, 2 Furious, 2 Sin, 2 Sinners. Sorry. Sinners 3, Tokyo Drift, you know, the fate of the sinners. Sinners 9, the Sin Saga. I would watch more movies, and I think there's more story left to tell in this world. And it does not end the way I thought it would, but I also struggle with some of what it's saying with its ending. But the movie carries itself seriously. It carries itself like art, and I respect it all the much for that. So that is why I give Sinners 4 out of 5 stars. Super duper happy I got to see it in theaters. You know, as I get older, I'm finding myself at a point where it's like, I don't have to give everything a high rating to tell you I loved it or really enjoyed it, right? I think I struggled with that when I first started out, especially when I was younger. When I was younger, if it had great action, I probably loved it. If it had a superhero I loved in it, unless it was like horrible, then I probably really liked it. And now I'm finding that, 3.5 stars or a 7 out of 10 is good. It's good. That's not a bad score. I can feel really mixed on a movie and love elements about it and think the other parts are really rough and give it 2.5 stars and call it mid and say that's fine. I don't consider that a positive review. I do consider that personally on the negative end of the spectrum because I'm not calling it good. It's not better that it was not or negative or whatnot. 5 out of 10 kind of thing. And then 4 stars, like in my head, how I tried to think of 5 stars is like masterpiece or really special to me kind of thing. 4.5 is like incredible, amazing, like experience. 4 stars is great. Like that is where great genuinely starts. 3.5 is good. 3 stars is like decent to maybe average. 5 stars is mid, and 2 stars bad. 1.5 horrible. 1 star awful, and then half star is like inexcusably the worst of the worst. I didn't mean to go through that whole list, but you get my point. But my mind is like, I try to quantify 4 stars and above as that's where great starts, and that's where Sinners is for me. It's great. It is a great movie, a great experience. So let's see. Andrew said Sinners. Oh, the 2 eyes. That's funny. Dude, they probably will do that. Or it'll be like the S at the end will be a 2 or something like that. It'll look like Sinner 2. Maybe they'll add a GY to it. It'll be Sinner G. That was dumb. I'm sorry. But yeah, any other final comments? What are some things you guys are looking forward to coming up, or anything about the movies that I didn't address that maybe you want me to? I will say I had my monthly film club last night, which Andrew is a part of, and we watched The Count of Monte Cristo and The Mask of Zorro. That's what I chose to show. And man, I love those movies. The Count of Monte Cristo is just obviously an incredible classic story that has influenced everything, including Zorro. But then when we were watching The Mask of Zorro, we realized the script of that movie, the screenplay itself, lifts a lot from The Count of Monte Cristo, and I didn't even realize it. They're kind of like similar time period movies that I was like setting swords and all that, and they lift a lot from each other. Count of Monte Cristo is a 4.5 star movie for me. I really love it. One of the most satisfying like revenge tales that has God and such a moral center like in it. I think it maybe should have been a 3-hour movie, the one with Jim Caviezel, to really flesh all the stuff out in the latter half. And The Mask of Zorro is a 5-star like experience for me. That's one of the best movies ever made. It's like a perfect film, perfect adventure swashbuckling movie, and a staple of my childhood. Andrew said, almost wrote that one too with the Sinners too. Nice. And Andrew said, great picks, and back when more movies had their climactic fights in daylight. Yes, thank you. The climactic fight in both of those, it's a little bit more subtle in Count of Monte Cristo, but the big climactic fight in the Zorro, Mask of Zorro is phenomenal. We need to get back to just doing more stuff practically like that, right? So much stuff is like done with VFX and like stunts are downplayed and like things are done on a green screen. I'm just like, why, man? Go out, shoot on location, and do some cool stuff. Jesse said Thunderbolts and Final Destination coming up. The movie I'm looking forward to the most is Jurassic World Rebirth and Superman. Final Destination is kind of a funny relationship I have with those because I'm one of my friends. We watch those together. So that'll be interesting. Definitely looking forward to Thunderbolts. Jurassic World Rebirth I'm a little bit nervous about because I didn't like the trailer at all. But I'm one of the like 5 people who liked Dominion a lot and one of the 10 people who liked Fallen Kingdom. So we'll see how it goes. I do like the director who's doing it. And Superman, I'm going to cry. I cry at the trailer every time I see it. So I'm very much looking forward to it. Super excited for the new DC universe. It's been a rough road getting here and has not been without some casualties. But yeah. Oh, Michael, thank you. Ludwig Göransson's incredible score. I don't know why I said it like that. I'm sorry. Dude, that score is incredible. I hope he does all of Coogler's movies, which I think he has. I think he's done literally all of them so far. He, to me, is like the best up-and-coming composer because I think he's only like 40. Up-and-coming in the sense of like he's not like Hans Zimmer and John Williams and all those guys. They're up there in age, right? I need to listen to it again. I haven't listened to it since the theater, but just the musical pieces that are in it and like the fusion of the different styles of like the jazz and really blues, not jazz, but the blues and the more jazzy moments, and then the kind of like Celtic moments that we get. Dude, just what a movie, right? And I love movies that include music at their center when it's not really even about music, but their music is a big theme. Because music's super impactful with movies for me, and I believe in like to get the true like cinematic experience, it's marrying image and sound, right? And sound being at its peak with music. So yeah, dude, it was incredible. I'd love to hear your thoughts on the. We need to dialogue about the music in it sometime because I think I kind of missed your thoughts on the movie. I know I saw your score, but JC said, really, I was stoked when I saw the Jurassic Park trailer. Yeah, this might get me into hot water, but it was too quippy. It felt like they were trying to make a Marvel movie out of the trailer. The jokes were bad. There's a lot of CG that didn't look super good to me. But Gareth Edwards is really good with shooting scale. So we'll see. I'm hoping it was just a bad trailer. And sometimes that happens. Not saying that everyone else shouldn't see the movie or shouldn't be excited by that trailer. It just didn't do it for me, personally. Andrew said they were roommates in college, so I hear. Yeah, I've heard they're roommates, and then I've heard that they just went to college together. But regardless, that's really cool. Talking about Coogler and Göransson. Michael said Count of Monte Cristo finale in the Tall Grass was one of my all-time favorites. Dude, it's so good. And how about Henry Cavill and Jim Caviezel actually do kind of look like they could be father and son in that movie, especially at the end. And it got us talking like Count of Monte Cristo influenced Batman down the line, but like Jim Caviezel could have been a good Batman back in the day, or maybe even a good Superman. Just said I think he said I can see that though. But yeah, well guys, I don't want to just keep this going to keep it going. These were three very interesting movies, all with the common theme of being very brutal. They're all super brutal in their violence and like tone. So hard R warning for that. R-rated warning. If that's not your thing, like brutal action and gore and things like that, then maybe stay away from these. Horror, all that. But they were definitely worth watching. And I always tell people, make up your own minds. Jesse said I can see where I'm coming from on that trailer. And I can see where you're coming from too. I totally get the hype of just having another dinosaur movie. Like Jurassic Park, right? But make up your own minds. I always like, even when I don't like a movie, people are like, I'm not going to bother to go see it. I'm like, no, support your theater. Like, unless it's like absolute garbage that I don't think should be supported, which I'll say, make up your own mind. Go see a movie. Tell people what you think. Don't let critics or people like me and your friends just tell you what to think. Form your own opinion. And if you don't like a trailer, then say you didn't like the trailer and you're not going to go see it. Just don't call a movie trash if you haven't seen it. Some of you know who I'm talking to you of there. But yeah. So I guess what I'm trying to say is to remember to always look for the good. Thanks, guys. I'll catch you next time.